Hello everybody, welcome to the TraderMerlin Show. It is your Thursday edition. I had a slight change. I was really looking forward to having Matt Leising on the program today, but he had a family emergency, guys, so we'll hopefully reschedule him for him down the road. But I figured since I told you I was going to talk about Ethereum, I'll keep it as a cryptocurrency type of show today, and we'll talk about some of the evolution going on in the cryptocurrency space. Now, some of you might not like the whole cryptocurrency world, but I think it's critical because in the next 3 to 10 years, pretty much, I think everything we'll be using will be some form of digital currency, most likely a cryptocurrency. And there will be a war coming on between centralized governments and these cryptocurrencies that are decentralized. And that statement I just said right there may have a lot of you confused. So I'm going to go back and start off somewhat elementary. Apologize for some of you crypto nerds out there. But I will be bringing us up to speed as to why it's important that we have these decentralized currencies. Also show you a lot of the flaws and problems that are happening right now because people believe they're trading something that's decentralized and it's not. A lot of these applications right now that are getting a lot of fanfare have the potential to be shut down in the snap of a finger, even though people think they're decentralized. So I will explain what all that means as we progress through today. So make sure that you guys send in your comments and questions. You can do that in the chat. We'll make it as interactive as we possibly can. And as always, hello all of you. I didn't get a chance to mention everybody's name, but thanks for joining us today. All right, I picked this graphic as a way for me to circumvent explaining everything, right? We obviously start off on the left-hand side of this, which deals with the original way that we transacted, which is simply barter, right? You'd have apples, I was a hunter, so I had the pelts, and I would trade you. That was barter system, which had its inefficiencies, of course. None of us really remember that, although we might be bartering occasionally with our neighbors, and etc. We moved to gold, a physical commodity. Then there were a lot of commodity currencies, guys. But they were using things like shells and dolphin teeth and things like that as currency back in the day. Don't know why this individual spelled metal coins with 2 L's. Maybe they're a Metallica fan. But we went to coins and then paper money or fiat currency. And that's where the story changes a little bit because what we had with fiat currency is something that's backed by the faith of the issuing government. Government has declared that legal tender, and basically any competition to them is considered, I guess it's a criminal offense to have anything that's against government's legal tender. And there have been people who have been arrested for that here in the United States. It also tends to, the value of that will move with supply and demand. And this is important because when we look at what cryptocurrency is, it takes a couple of these out of the equation. Now, a show of hands here, how many of you have faith in our government? I'm just curious if you're as cynical as I am. But yes or no, do you guys have faith in our government right now? I mean, come on, we can't even agree on having a debate online because we have stubborn people and people don't want to agree to certain things, and all of a sudden we have an inefficient government. So fiat currency is something that Brendan in here will tell you is going to go the way of the dodo. There has not been a successful fiat currency that stood the test of time. They will all fail. I am not an anti-government. I do believe the government serves a purpose and it can help if those people in government actually had interest in the people that they were governing. Instead, most of it is all about them lining their own pockets, making themselves rich, etc., but this won't be a political show. So the fiat currency system has been an example of manipulation at the highest level. And I've shown you guys this before. This is the value of the US dollar purchasing power from 1913 to 2016. I could probably update it and make it a little bit more current. But that's the value of your dollar. And the reason for that is, you see this blue line coming on, because the amount of money we've been printing has just gone skyrocket high, and that's gotten even worse over the last 6 months. I mean, they've put trillions of dollars into the economy out of thin air, and to me, that is very problematic. That will just further push the purchasing power of your dollar down. The point here is, as was mentioned in chat here, they can manipulate that currency as much as possible. They can do whatever they want with it. To me, that's the big challenge here when we look at it. Now, the other side of this is digital currency. So we got a small group of this today. Apparently people don't like the crypto topic. Just because I love the interaction. How many of you used digital currency today? Yes or no? Did you use digital currency today? I think I've already asked you this from the past because it is kind of a trick question. I think it's a trick question. But how many of you use digital currency today? I can tell you I did. I did. I went and had lunch today, and I swiped my credit card. Credit card, guys, is a digital currency. So anybody here use their credit cards today, you used a digital currency. Yes, you did, Boy Gab. You used a digital currency. If you bought something online, if you used a credit card, if you didn't physically exchange cash and use something else, then you use digital currency. The reason I always like to do that, so then Tom, you used digital currency, didn't you? You bought online and that went through a credit card company, etc. So it's kind of a trick question, and I love bringing this one up because a lot of people are like, oh, well, digital currency. I don't believe in that whole digital currency stuff. You all believe in it because that's how we transact. I mean, unless you write a check, which technically would be considered digital. I know, Big Ev. Do you think I'm going to just give you softball questions that aren't tricky? Of course they're tricky. I like it because a lot of people think that they're not. And it's just a simple way to change your mindset. Digital currencies are nothing new. They've been around for a long time, all right? And we're all using them. So we got to be comfortable with that. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. And this is the man, the myth, the legend, the none other than Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi Nakamoto, this poor guy, unfortunately, this gentleman's name is Satoshi Nakamoto. And Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008 wrote the white paper for Bitcoin, which looks a lot like this. And I would encourage you, if you are a geek like me and kind of want to know more about it, read this white paper. It's just basically a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That's all that Satoshi Nakamoto wanted. Now, nobody knows if this guy is even real. If it's a person, if it's an entity, if it's a government, some people think it's NSA. Who knows who wrote this white paper or came up with this idea? Bottom line is it circulated, and we saw Bitcoin start shortly after that. So this is really the dawn of a new era, because if you read through the paper, which again I really encourage you to do, it voices some frustrations in the system, the way that transactions are processed, and was really about the crash in 2007 and 8. It was like, why the hell am I a prisoner of my bank? If I want to give Brennan $10, I should be able to give him $10 no matter what. Not have my bank tell me, hey, I'm going to charge you a fee for that. I'm going to slow down that transaction. And this whole peer-to-peer thing said, if I have the money and we have digital accounts, I can simply send it to anybody. Why do I need a bank? Let's cut out the intermediaries. And I think it's interesting because when you look at what we teach at Online Trade Academy, in many cases, you're trying to eliminate as many intermediaries as possible. You're trying to get away from an intermediary because an intermediary does what? It adds cost to the transaction. So the Bitcoin principle, in theory, was to create a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And it's brilliant. It actually really is brilliant when we look at the architecture. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into the architecture of it today, but I saw a funny quote from Satoshi Nakamoto, which, again, nobody knows who this guy is. Apparently he's got, I think there was I read something like there was 4 million Bitcoins in his account that haven't moved, some crazy amount like that. Anyway, he made a quote in 2010, which I thought was worth sharing because I have tried to explain Bitcoin to haters for a long time. He wrote this. He says, sorry to be a wet blanket, but writing a description of Bitcoin for general audiences is bloody hard. There's nothing to relate it to. And that was in July of 2010. So I'm guessing he's probably British or Australian because he used the word bloody hard in there, so we can narrow that down. But anyway, it is very challenging. The big perks here to a cryptocurrency, and again, we'll look at some of the new ones, I'll talk to you about evolution as well, is this. It's a digital asset using cryptography to secure the transactions. It's basically code, and I could do a whole show if you were interested at some point talking about the probabilities of cracking a Bitcoin account. So for example, I've shown you guys a paper wallet before, which has a private key and a public key. To hack that private key, your odds are this, like, it's crazy, all right? I had the math for the amount of sand grains on Earth, right? It was like 10 to the 22nd power or something. To give you an idea, let's say, and I can show you an address right now of Bitcoin that has over $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. $1 billion freaking dollars worth of Bitcoin sitting in one account. And you're like, if I could just hack that, the amount of possible combinations for you to hack that is this. It's like taking the code and writing it on 1 grain of sand and pick any beach around the world and throw it on one beach. And don't tell anybody which beach it's on. Just drop that 1 grain of sand. And then I want you to add like another 30 feet of sand on top of the earth and cover it. And now find that 1 grain. That's like the probability of cracking it by a hard hack, meaning getting in there and cracking that code. It's not going to happen. It's mathematically impossible. There's not enough computing power. It would take centuries with current technology to hack it. So it's a cryptographic function that protects it. And it's bizarre because all it is a digital space in the ether. It's just out there, right? That's the weird part. It has no intrinsic value, has no physical form. So if someone says, hey, here, I got a Bitcoin in my hand, you want to buy it? Don't buy it. I almost sold John O'Donnell one. Big Eb, I am saying there's a chance, but it would be much easier if you were Jim Carrey to get the girl in Dumb and Dumber than it would be to crack this code. All right. Also, and a very important one, is supply and demand is not determined by a central bank. Right now, the dollar is not dictated. It's the Treasury, really, but the Fed has the ability to create it out of thin air. So there's no restrictions on it. And as you keep printing money, as every fiat currency around the world is doing, what happens? The value of that drops. I did a show a couple weeks back where I talked about why Bitcoin's going to be $100,000 by, I believe I said 2023, 2022, somewhere. I think I said by the end of 2022. And the reason for that is you can't change the number of, well, let me take that back. Theoretically, they could change the amount of Bitcoins available from 21 million, but they're not going to, right? That's kind of the novelty of it. It's fixed. Some of the other cryptocurrencies, as you look to buy into a cryptocurrency or a token, keep in mind on many of them there is no ceiling and they have the ability to inflate or deflate the value of that cryptocurrency through supply and demand on the issuance level. Okay, so that's another key one. Bitcoin's one that's saying we're stuck at 21 million and we're not going to change. So this part, might be boring for some of you, but I look at what makes this so special, and it has to do with the structuring of the data, the information, and where it keeps this ledger. I want you to think of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Dogecoin, all these as just a database. That's all it is. It's a database of the future. The old databases were a centralized entity, and this is the important part here. When I say centralized, you have problems. You have singular control. So we all have a bank account right now, okay? I'm assuming you all have a bank account, but let's say that you guys all have a JP Morgan Chase bank account. JP Morgan Chase has the ledger. They know exactly what amount of money I have in there, all the transactions that I have made, who I'm sending money to. They control all of that. The crazy part, or the dangerous part here, is it's vulnerable, because if I'm trying to attack a system, if I'm looking to get to hack that bank's account, I have singular target, right? I can just go after that bank. I also have trust issues. There was an example with Dole a couple of years back where they sold and went private. So they sold all their shares and went private off the exchange. And it ended up being that there was many more shares claimed than were actually in circulation because there was just bad tracking of the data. It doesn't happen with blockchain because everything is accounted for. If you've got, Sister Molly Knickknack out there trying to keep track of all the transactions that happen in the stock market by pen and paper, things are going to get lost. And there's human involvement, probably going to have some issues there. This is all digital. It's all done by computers, and there's no margin for error there when things are programmed correctly. So that's a major piece here is the trust issue. It's controlled by that centralized entity there. In this case would be your bank. Now, when we look at the advancements, this is where it gets better, and why cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are doing so well is this no longer has that singular control. You notice that everybody can share information with everybody else. The challenge for those of you who don't understand cryptos, this is the challenge, is, wait a minute. If everybody has access to everybody else's information, nothing's private. Well, that's true to an extent. Remember, in this situation, this individual right here at the top, let me see if I can buy my drawing tools out here for you. And I am going to get to the evolution, guys. But listen, this guy is, can I type on this? I don't know if I can type in PowerPoint. Yeah, I can't type. But, he's going to have a string of characters representing who this individual is, right? And it could be very, very long. I mean, you could have this 1, 2, here's his number, his code, right? And all I know is his number. It's just this long string of characters. I don't know that it's Merlin Rothfeld. I just know that it's 126A 3 capital B D V C 6725194683725692A capital B D G. I mean, that's what these codes are like. So I don't know exactly who it is, but I can see their number and track that account. So the decentralized part of it, it makes this ledger open so everybody knows who's holding what. This guy right here, he can see immediately what this guy has in that account just by looking up an account number, okay? So This to me is a revolution in it. Now, the reason I'm going over this elementary stuff is as I get to the evolution, I start talking about DeFi and decentralized exchanges. You have to understand that there's 3 types of blockchain, right? We've talked about this before. You can't lump blockchain into one category and say, oh, yay, I'm excited for blockchain. It's revolutionary. No. A lot of them are crap. If the Fed comes out with FedCoin, garbage. It's crap. It's no difference in the dollar. It's just a digital dollar, period. They control it. Now, if you look at this list here, I made 3 different breakdowns. You have a public blockchain, which is what we're looking for, right? That's what I'm looking for when I buy Bitcoin. Basically, it's a consensus algorithm where you have hundreds and if not thousands of computers around the world, which makes it impossible to shut it down, that are all in consensus about how they're processing information. They'll agree upon transactions, put them to the ledger. It's open source, and anybody can participate in this, right? That is the interesting part about a public blockchain. Federated or consortium blockchains are where it's going to be set up by a group, and that group controls everything. So if they want to change the number of shares, they want to change different pieces of it, they can do it at a moment's whim. Where would you see things like a consortium or federated blockchain? Well, I'm thinking of the financial services industry, prime candidate for it. If I'm Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and JP Morgan Chase, it would make sense for us to merge together, at least on a database back end, and say, hey, why don't we set up our own blockchain that's connecting the banks so that you can very quickly, instantly send money from my clients to your clients, and everything's trackable, it's faster, it's more efficient. And that would only be controlled by that small select group of banks. That is kind of what Ripple is doing, right? Ripple is more of a federated blockchain, not really a public blockchain. So that's one consideration. The third option here is what's called a private blockchain. And this would probably be what like a Walmart would do, right? They're going to have their own private blockchain where they're tracking all logistics and shipping and costs and distribution, etc. That would be really no big deal. That's just probably a better way of having a private database is using a blockchain, because once you put something in the blockchain, you can't really change the data, right? It's fixed. So now that I've gone through the basics, I want to go to this part here. This part is what I like. I'm sorry if these graphics are a little bit weird. I kind of slapped this together last second. It's really the crypto evolution. We've moved away from fiat currencies, or are moving away from fiat currencies, and now we're in an environment where you have digital currency, but that's centralized, right? When I say digital currency, I saw you guys talk about PayPal. I saw you talk about Visa. Visa, MasterCard, Discover, those are all digital currencies, but they are centralized because Discover owns the database, Visa owns the database, MasterCard owns the database, PayPal owns the database. As soon as you get away from that centralized piece, then you start to get some excitement, right? That's where you start to get that crypto space. So, I'm going to real quickly show you just the kind of the basics, and a lot of my animations don't work here. I had to pull this from other presentation I'd made, and it didn't really work on the converting. But I'm breaking it down into 3 distinct generations, and we're on Gen 3 right now with regards to the technology and infrastructure in place. The main highlight of it, though, is what's going on in Phase 3, because that's where all of a sudden products, services can be accessible mainstream. And I think that's... Brendan says, Visa and MasterCard are scrambling to get involved in crypto. Absolutely. You know, it's not necessarily they're getting into crypto. They're just developing blockchain technology of their own, right? And certainly my guess is they will be buying into other blockchain projects like they were going to try to buy into Libra and things like that. So let's look at the peer-to-peer exchange system of Bitcoin and what it really entailed, okay? It was single purpose. This was not meant to be a programmable blockchain. It was not meant to be an area where you could write, smart contracts. And it wasn't designed for scalability. It has very poor scalability. Bitcoin can only do, I think it's like 4 transactions a second, something like that. There's no way that would be sufficient to handle global demand of an electronic peer-to-peer cash system. So what has happened is Bitcoin has really become more of a store of value, right? Is looking at something that's not really intended to be traded a lot. It's called digital gold, right? That's really what Generation 1 was. And, you basically I don't have the animation, but you send that currency over to somebody else and it's recorded in a blockchain, done. That's it. That's simple. Generation 2, and this is why I started this whole thing today, because Matt Leising, who wrote that book, Out of the Ether, was talking about Ethereum. And Ethereum, headed by probably one of the strangest, weirdest, brilliant minds on the planet, Beautiful Minds Squared, is Vitalik Buterin. Buterin, how do you want to pronounce his last name? And I would encourage you guys, if you have some time and you want to be entertained, go to YouTube and just type in Vitalik Buterin. There are some very interesting interviews that he's done. He's a savant. I mean, he's one of those guys. He's got, I think he has some personal issues, but he is brilliant mind. I think, Brendan, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he like 14 when he created Ethereum? I think he was 14 years old. His game that he liked to play was with Excel spreadsheets. 14 years old, I'm not playing with Excel spreadsheets. I'm chasing girls. I mean, come on. But Vitalik was all about spreadsheets and writing code inside the Excel spreadsheet. And all of a sudden, he came up with this idea for Ethereum, which just launched globally and became amazing. So the big change here, Joseph, if you put Bill Gates next to Vitalik, you just laugh your ass off. Bill Gates was just a nerd, a flat-out nerd. Vitalik I'll actually, Brendan, do me a favor if you wouldn't mind. Just type it into chat. Vitalik Buterin, because I'm trying to do too many things here at once. But I might even just bring up a page. It's hard to stomach because when you watch him and he's not talking, you can tell he's on the spectrum. So it looks a little odd. But as soon as he opens his mouth and gets going in his thought track, it's brilliant. I mean, he is just a mastermind. He knows so much stuff. It's crazy. I think he's one of those guys that just reads a book. Thank you, Brendan. He reads a book and it just seems like he can memorize it. And it's always about coding and theory and on all kinds of bizarre stuff. Anyway, with Ethereum, what we're really looking at here and why it's so important is it's multi-purpose. Remember, Generation 1 was just transaction. Nothing more. It wasn't meant to be programmable. Now, the brilliance of what Vitalik came up with is, I'm going to create a centralized backbone and just call it your central nervous system. That's kind of what Ethereum is. And other tokens have now the ability to tie into the Ethereum blockchain, that central nervous system, and basically run their business on that blockchain. And Ethereum is decentralized, right? It's not on a centralized server. So you have this, like a giant spine or a central nervous system that you can patch into. So if you want to start a new blockchain or token company and you're using your tokens to fund it, transactions, all sorts of different business opportunities can be plugged into the Ethereum blockchain, which of course now does what? It makes the necessity to maintain and upgrade and keep Ethereum going a high priority for everybody who's attached to it. And there are hundreds, probably thousands of different projects plugging into the Ethereum blockchain, which now you're looking at a symbiotic relationship. If Ethereum goes down, all these other projects fail. So now these projects are helping fund Ethereum to make sure that it's the best out there and becomes a lead dog. It's a really interesting type of project where it's symbiotic. Everybody who's using it has a serious interest in Ethereum surviving. Okay, so you have multi-purpose. You can write code to it. It makes it programmable, which is a big piece. We'll talk about smart contracts here in a second. The problem with Ethereum when it was originally done is poor scalability, right? It just was not designed to handle the multitude of projects that are being plugged into it, right? And Brendan says most of the most promising projects are built on Ethereum. I would say probably 90% of all of the really great cryptocurrency or crypto type of projects are patched into Ethereum. And here you have something that when it started out, just like Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin started out as a peer-to-peer exchange. But as it became more popular, all of that growth of people trying to transact on it just bogged down the system. The system could no longer handle that type of transaction ability, and that leads us to Generation 3, which is how do we make it scalable at this point? Bitcoin still is slow, right? You have 10 minutes per transaction. In peak times, it can be much longer than that. Ethereum is going to be much faster because it can handle more transactions, but it's still not made to handle Visa-type transactions. So they need to do something to fix that. That was their big downfall. Now that leads us to, actually, let me actually go back here because some of you might not understand what smart contracts are. A smart contract is very simple to understand. I'm going to do a very crude example here, and it's basically an if-then statement, and we can make them as complex as we want. But let's just run a scenario here. Let's say Big Eb and I have a bet, right? And Big Eb's like, man, I'll bet you that the 49ers, I gotta go on my camera here because I'm going to talk trash. I think some of you guys are Raiders fans, but Big Eb says, I'll bet you the 49ers have a worse record than whatever football team Big Eb likes. Let me know if you have a football team, Big Eb, and we'll make our smart contract. He says, I'll bet you that the 49ers have a worse record than my football team. In a normal market environment, a normal wager, I don't know where Big Eb lives, but I can make that wager with him. And let's say that I win the bet. Now I got to sit here and chat every day. Hey, Big Eb, hey, where's that $20 you owe me, man? Oh, yeah, I'll get it to you. Okay, well, and I got to keep hounding him to chase it down and get it. Then I got to figure out how to get it. Is he going to email it to me? Is he going to send it to my account? Oh, he's a Seahawks fan? How do you block people on this channel? I got to get this guy out of here. So let's say he's a Seahawks fan. We got a good rivalry, buddy. It's going to be a good year. You guys look really, really good. I hate Russell Wilson. Guy always just comes out of nowhere and wins the damn game. Dub Bears. So we can prevent all of this. This me chasing Big Eb down when the 49ers, beat the Seahawks, as they're going to do plenty of times this year. My team is hurting. Here's how it would work. It's a simple if-then statement. So instead of me making that wager with Big Eb here and just talking trash about our teams and, okay, let's make a wager, it's about actually putting money on the line. So let me explain how this works with a smart contract. Think of it as an if-then statement. If something is true, perform this action. If it's not true, perform this action, right? There's yes and no on here, but it just didn't show up. So here's an example that I wrote out. Let's say I bet my friend Scott $100 that the weather here in Irvine, California will be greater than 64 degrees on October 18th, 2020, right? Now, my friend Scott lives up in Northern California. So one of us will be right, and one of us is going to chase each other down and say, hey, I won. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. What was it? There's all sorts of issues here with regards to me claiming that bet. So with a smart contract, it's very simple, right? We don't have to deal with the collection of the wager or the verification of the data, because he might go, hey, I looked at my iPhone, it told me it was 63 degrees, and I said, well, I went to weather.com, and it said it was 67. So problem right there, right? Here's an example, and Brendan, don't say a word. This is not actual code. I wrote this like an Excel statement, but basically it looks like this. It's something like this, all right? This is not actual code, so I know Brendan's like rolling his eyes at me right now. Sorry, buddy. So what happens is, Tom, my buddy Scott or Tom on our bet, we would send in to an address digital currency for $100 each. And once both of our money reaches that account, it now has a piece of code or a smart contract. And it says, where's my mouse? If on October 18th, 2020, the weather in Irvine, California, and then we can actually add an oracle. We can both agree it's going to go out and check the oracle here, which is the API of weather.com. So that's where it's going to pull it. And if at any point during that 24-hour period, temperature is above 64 degrees, well, what happens is that $200 is going to go to this first address, which would be mine. If it's not above 64 degrees, it's just simply going to go to the second address, which would be Scott's or Tom's or Big Eb's in this equation. So it's a very simple way to quickly and efficiently have negotiated contracts. And of course, I'm using sorry, bald-head bees. I know it's confusing, but basically what it is these numbers down here at the bottom, this 1, D2, 3. Just imagine that those are a Bitcoin address or some cryptocurrency address. So it's simply sending it back to your account. That's all it is. So to me, smart contracts are really the big advantage here when you look at something like Ethereum. Yes, it's like exactly. It's an escrow account, but there's no humans. There's not one human involved in it. So you don't have to worry about calling you. Hi, Lisa. This is Merlin over at 123.com. Tom and I made a big bet, and I want to get paid. None of that. It's just instant. Boom, paid. If at any point during that day weather was over 64 degrees, that money just shows up in my account. Done. So obviously this is going to be big for the betting world. That's just the simple example I use. But there's a lot of other things that could make this faster. For example, we have some real estate agents that like to join here. And you mentioned escrow, Big Eb. Imagine you have, you're buying a piece of property. And there's this list of all of these things that you need to submit and have approved before you finally get everything. Well, instead of having it all done and sitting there for the loan officer and all these different people to take their time and finish their coffee and get off their lunch break and actually do it, you submit the actual documents that you need, and the second all of those are in, boom, keys in your hand, house is yours, done, digital transaction. So now I may not have 30-day escrows or 90-day escrows. It might be a 2-day escrow, depending on what information is needed, and that all will be held in smart contracts. It can be done for legal, it can be done for a wide variety of transactions. There was a very interesting example a friend of mine was talking about, which was, think of this decentralized activity. So let's say, you guys, we decided to start a decentralized insurance company. Totally plausible, right? And here's how it would work. I start up a page, a web service, hopefully decentralized, and in that service, you can be a buyer or a lender in the insurance process. Because who makes money in the insurance companies? The insurance company. They don't lose money. So what happens is, let's say that Brendan, he bought himself a new motorcycle, and Brendan's like, I need to get some motorcycle insurance. I don't want to go to Geico or Allstate because they just rake you over the coals with all their overhead. And most of the money you're paying is anyway for advertisement. So you go to this website, you log in, it's connected to a decentralized blockchain, and basically Brendan says, I have a 2010 CBR 600, Honda CBR 600 with this many miles on it. Here's a copy of my driving record. And we can all look at that and rate. He's like, okay, he's got a perfect driving record. He's been riding motorcycles for 8 years, and I can evaluate that risk. And if he's asking for a $10,000 policy, I might chip in $1,000. So I put in $1,000. And if 9 other people do that, then all of a sudden he has the policy that he wants. And what do we get out of it? We get a percentage of his premiums. So if I put in $1,000 on a $10,000 insurance policy or contract that Brendan wants, I'm going to get 1/10 of whatever premium he pays in. And if at the end of that year, or whatever time frame the contract is, he hasn't been in any accidents, I get my $1,000 back and he has to go and redo his insurance. Totally decentralized. Yes, they are binding, right? It's a legal binding contract, but I don't have to go through these centralized entities that have been absolutely abusing, I think, not just Americans, but people around the world, because they are centralized entities that control all the information and overcharge for a lot of things. So that's just one of the applications of programmability. And again, we could do a month worth of shows just on the prospects and what you can do. So where are the lead dogs? Now, I made this a while back, so these aren't necessarily the leaders right now. But what you have with like Neo, Lisk, EOS, and there are many others. Really? Later, Jeff. You're blocked. Remove. Get out of here with you trying to pan your crap on my audience. Beat it, buddy. Anyway, multi-purpose, programmable, and then scalable. If you look at Blocktivity, which I was showing you a while back, I'll show you Blocktivity here real quick because I think it's just fascinating. Here is Blocktivity. All Blocktivity is doing is showing you the activity on a specific network or blockchain. Okay? Look at EOS. Its record is 115,000 transactions in a 24-hour period. That is huge. Like, that's almost Visa-type transaction, which is why I was a fan of EOS. But for some reason, they just haven't really gotten mainstream acceptability yet. I don't get why. If you look at down here, now you got Telos, right? Activity, last 24 hours, 4 million transactions. Look at Bitcoin. Here's BTC. They only did less than 1 million transactions, right? Their record is only 1 million transactions in a 24-hour period. That's slow, right? That's slow compared to everybody else. So to me, it's important when you're thinking of phase 3, generation 3, who's got that scalability. Now let me change something here real quick because I am a big fan. I think that if I had to pick my top 2 cryptocurrency projects, they're already the big dogs. Number 1, hands down, is Bitcoin. I am a huge fan of Bitcoin. I just say buy and hold that thing. It's digital gold. Number 2 is Ethereum. And the reason I like Ethereum is I think it was the first to market and there were a lot of imitators, but I think some of the real brains are still at Ethereum and they're doing changes, upgrades to the system, which are getting a little challenging. Some of these changes are difficult, but it's going to now allow them to scale their system up. For example, they're doing a thing called sharding, which basically it fragments the blockchain a little bit and allows them to speed up transactions and information. And with this sharding, it's going to be going up by a factor of 64. So now all of a sudden, if you're doing 1,000 transactions a day, you're now doing 64,000 transactions a day. That's huge upgrade in the functionality. Now they're having some hiccups right now as they're trying to roll it out, but I think that's essentially what it will be. Big Eb, Ethereum 2 is essentially that. It's a series of upgrades, like 4 or 5 different things that are all ending to be one goal of an Ethereum that's much more robust, much more stable. It's actually switching over to a proof of stake, which I'll explain here in just a second. So, back to my slides before I run out of time here. I didn't think we'd be going this long on it, but here I am. So let me talk to you about how they change the scalability. Right? Yes, I agree with Brendan. All Ethereum projects will spike big time if they succeed. And the question is if. I do believe that they will, but if they succeed, that could be an absolute game changer, especially given how many programs are already on Ethereum. So here's what we mean by scalability. And I apologize, some of these graphics were taken from another presentation and I didn't get a chance to upgrade them. But let's just say you're Bitcoin, right? And right now, Bitcoin can only handle a certain amount of transactions per block of data, right? So let's say that I'm just assuming it handles 10 transactions per block. So I've got 10 transactions here. Anybody else who sends in a transaction after that, they're not going to get in, right? They're not going to make it in that block of data. So everybody here in red is out in the cold. So one problem that's happening now is everybody in green, if you want to force your way in, you pay more money. You pay a bigger fee, and the miners will now let you in. So that's kind of a little bit of favoritism here. But that's the problem with something like Ethereum. It's also a problem with something like Bitcoin, where on a high volume day, you don't really get the transactions in. It could be bogged down. So you have something that's called let's say, for example, the Lightning Network, right? Lightning Network does this. It adds a second layer. So basically what it's doing is it's taking all of the transactions that happen, right? You can see everybody there is in green, and then it reports to the blockchain of Bitcoin, only one transaction, but it has all of those changes in it. So it's basically like an aggregation layer here, that second layer. Layers are pretty critical because they now allow for much more transactions to be done on a blockchain through one transaction, if that makes sense. And this is really what Ethereum is trying to do. They're trying to take their technology and modify it, but also add in tools that give them that kind of second layer. And I'll show you why this is so important. Now, you might have some bio geeks here. I talk about the power of layers. And I made this one up because this is how my mind works. So I apologize if you guys are like, what the hell is Merlin talking about? This is the periodic table. And we can start off with the most common elements here, right? Hydrogen, helium. And it's all about the number of electrons circling around that neutron. Or proton. I forgot my chemistry. But anyway, it's all about layers. And as we add in layers, right, you start to create more complex elements. So it's layer 3, layer 4, and all of a sudden you're looking at some very complicated stuff as you start to get on the radioactive stuff here at the bottom. Look at it this way. Here's hydrogen. Basically, I got one electron. Well, if I add on a couple layers, I now have carbon. And if I continue to add on more and more layers, I can start to create more complex elements. Some have great rarity, some are in demand, some aren't. But here we have gold, right? This is what the molecular structure is for gold. I believe it's 79 electrons in gold. And the whole point here is without layers, we wouldn't get there. So, yeah, sorry for the freshman memories, Joseph. I just built this because I just think this way. And every time we can add layers, it might add more robustness to the system and the ability to create and do more things. So here's the reason I brought this up is because we were talking about Ethereum. And a lot of these programs that are written on Ethereum, basically they're attaching to that Ethereum blockchain. And there are a lot of them. And Brendan says most of the big important programs out there. And again, they're not just digital currencies. It could be digital insurance. It could be digital ID. It could be, the list is endless of what you can do. The hottest area right now in the whole crypto space is DeFi, decentralized finance. So you have all of these sites where you can go and you can put your cryptocurrency there. Maybe you leave it there for a couple weeks and you gain some interest on it, right? Because you're lending it out, blah, blah, blah. What's funny is a lot of those sites are hosted on Amazon Web Services. And it's been an issue lately because if something's hosted on AWS, is it truly centralized? No. Bezos can come in, hit a button, that site's down, done. And all the data's gone. So to me, these are kind of dangerous things that you have to look at when you're buying into a cryptocurrency or a token project. The DeFi stuff is exciting, right? There's a lot of opportunity in that DeFi space. And I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. But people are kind of stretching it a little bit because the whole purpose of all this, in my opinion, is the decentralization. I have all my cryptos, take that back. I have a majority of my cryptos on a device or on paper wallets that I control, and they can't be touched because it's a decentralized cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum. Once we start to get centralized, then there is the risk that somebody could come in and shut it down right away. It's come up here before in the past where, DeFi, yam, burgers, it's a little bit out of hand right now, isn't it, Brendan? But if I have the ability to have my accounts taken away from me, then what's the difference? Why not just keep it in a regular Chase or Wells Fargo account? I don't want that government ability to seize my assets, right? They can come over and they can grab my nano ledgers or my treasure wallets, but they're not going to be able to get what's on it without my codes. So, oh, I forgot the code. Sorry, I lost it. I can't get in. So be careful with that, guys. A lot of these decentralized apps are not actually decentralized. They are, in fact, centralized and can be shut down on a moment's notice. So as you buy into anything, be very, very careful out there. What else? Were there questions that came through? I kind of just wanted to do a history of it because people would ask me about, well, which ones do you like? And I think Brendan would agree with me. He's got a much bigger portfolio than I do. I haven't been as in touch as I was a couple years ago, but I do have a pretty sizable portfolio in the crypto space. And when I built that, it was based off of the projects themselves. I went and said, what are these companies doing? What's the goal? I have companies in phase 1, I have companies in phase 2, and I have definitely companies in phase 3 because I got to look at what do I want to achieve with this? Is my goal in the crypto space, I'm going to find the decentralized Google. I'm going to find the decentralized Amazon. Look, both of those types of marketplaces are already growing in the decentralized world because if you haven't watched The Social Experiment, I think it's called The Social Experiment on Netflix, go out and watch that. That is an absolutely eye-opening movie. We all kind of thought this was happening, but there are now digital decentralized browsers, digital decentralized marketplaces, and my hope is that these will continue to grow because I hope it's a big FU to like Amazon and Google and all these companies that are just abusing the consumer and selling data and all that stuff. So Big Up says, Merlin, you may buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, but then transfer it to a digital wallet. Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Colin, I'm a fan of Chainlink as well. Just bought some EOS. Well, EOS is a weird one. When you look at what they've been able to do transactionally, it's phenomenal. I mean, to get that sort of transaction ability, but I don't understand. I feel like they've got a bad marketing department or a bad, I guess a bad CEO or something, because if you're doing that type of transactions, you should be able to go to the entire crypto world and go, hey, Ethereum people, you're bogged down. You're paying too much for transactions, can't get your stuff processed quickly, come to our blockchain. We're way faster, and we don't charge you any fees. So they should be lining up on EOS. I don't understand what's there. So I'm a little cautious with regards to that because if I've got a project, DeFi, decentralized, whatever you want to call it, if I'm going to be figuring out who I'm going to attach my project to, I'm going to go to whoever's going to give me the best transactions, the lowest fee. I mean, it's the same thing if I'm a merchant trying to use some credit cards. I'm going to find, I won't accept this card because you charge too much. EOS should be dominant right now. They should be, but for some reason they're just not making it. Now, some of you are asking about the upgrade to Ethereum 2.0. Let me explain a couple things here real quick. I want to make sure I get out of here on time. When you look at the main argument against Bitcoin is energy consumption. They're saying that to run the Bitcoin network, the amount of energy that the miners are using to basically back end that whole blockchain is, the amount of energy that entire countries are using. That's a problem. There's ways to fix that, right? But the more reward there is for people on Bitcoin, the more people are going to try to mine it. That's called proof of work. Everybody's computer is trying to solve a complex puzzle, and whoever solves it first gets the reward, which is Bitcoin. So people are building these amazingly robust systems that require more and more and more power, and they're improving all the CPUs and graphics cards, whatever, so they have a better chance of solving that puzzle. That's a proof of work, and that's what Bitcoin and Ethereum are. In the upgrade to Ethereum, they're going to be moving to what's called proof of stake. Proof of stake says no longer is it this rogue competition amongst every single person that's got a computer competing for hashing power and basically draining the electric grid. But proof of stake says if you have a certain amount of a cryptocurrency, in the case of Ethereum, it's going to be 32 Ethereum, you can now stake that, meaning you're putting it into the system as a stake, as a commitment, and you are now allowed to make transactions and record transactions from that database. So Ethereum would now be rewarding people by paying them in Ethereum for staking. That's proof of stake. What's nice about this is I don't have to have a monster CPU. I can just use a regular computer here, and it's just a simple node. I have to have the requirements for the node on the network, but now if I stake, proof of stake, I now have the ability to be making money from that computer running in the background, recording transactions, and I'm part of a big pool of people. So that migration has some security flaws, which I won't get into now, but proof of stake is probably where a lot of these cryptocurrencies are going to go because of the black eye that the power consumption that Bitcoin has been doing, and a lot of people say, it shouldn't be that way, but that's part of the security of Bitcoin. Ron says, it's been 2.5 years, but can you still buy Bitcoin through Coinbase using GDAX? Yes. No, you wouldn't pay zero fees. So Ron, you can go through, it's no longer called GDAX, it's just called Coinbase Pro. You can buy Bitcoin there. It's a lot cheaper than going to Coinbase. So if you have both those accounts, don't buy it at Coinbase. Go to Coinbase Pro and buy it there. You can go through their fee structure and see what it costs. There's generally a difference between what's called being a maker or a taker, meaning are you taking liquidity away from the market or are you adding liquidity? I can fill you in more in details on that if you guys want. So are the miners in the investment of the future? No, I know. And GD, that's a great question. That's exactly what I think I just pointed out. The miners are for proof of work. That model is changing. Bitcoin will probably always be proof of work, so they'll probably always have miners, but a lot of the projects are starting to either migrate away or start up in a different. You have all sorts of different programs too. You have DAG, decentralized acyclical graphs, and all sorts of weird new technologies, which may change the landscape as well. But for right now, it's pretty much proof of work and proof of stake are the two technologies. Proof of work, much more secure. It's a much more secure structure, but it requires a ton of power. Proof of stake uses far less power consumption, but it has some vulnerabilities as well. Okay. Whew. Guys, I think I covered it. I went through a ton of stuff here, and I'm already late. Let me run through the economic calendar. Now, I'm going to be out of town for the next couple days, so I won't be doing a show tomorrow or Monday. Sorry, guys. Just got to do what you got to do. Got to take a little bit of time off for myself. I'll be taking a couple of days off this month. So I'm going to walk you through your economic calendar for tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday, just so I have you all set up. Here's what we got cooking for Monday the 9th. Sorry, this is for tomorrow, because I'm not here tomorrow either. Really one announcement for the U.S., which is final wholesale inventories. Right now, expectations are we're going to stay exactly where we're at 0.5%. You also have unemployment rate change for Canada, which is expected to drop down below 10. I'm sure the Canadians, neighbors to the north, are happy with that. Moving down here to Monday's session, here's what's going on for October 12th. You can see really nothing for the U.S. It's all about British pound with claimant count change and their unemployment rate. On Tuesday, we get the U.S. back in action with the NFIB Small Business Index and CPI numbers. And then really, earnings is no big deal until Tuesday. Tuesday, let it all begin. I feel like I should have some dramatic music playing right now. Dun, 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 because it's big bank day. You got JP Morgan, you got Citigroup, you got BlackRock. It's basically the beginning of a massive, massive financial institution reporting week. You also have Delta Airlines, Johnson & Johnson, and Fastenal, and many, many others reporting earnings on Tuesday. But that's it for your economic calendar and earnings calendar. If you guys have any last-minute questions, feel free to send those on in. Of course, if you want to know more, I might be able to do more shows on this topic. I get the feeling a lot of people don't like crypto or are kind of turned off by it. I'm fascinated by it. I think if we look at, when joining a revolution, it's still in its infancy. I think we are still way in its infancy, but the implications of decentralized applications, blockchain technology, even tokenizing investments is far, far, far more reaching. It could be one of those generational changes that we all look back in hindsight and go, man, I wish I was a part of that. That said, many of the projects are absolute crap. They're garbage. They're just scammers trying to make a couple quick bucks. It's actually gotten a lot better, right? If you went back to 2017, there were 12-year-old kids creating a blockchain in their basement, selling an ICO and getting rich and disappearing. Happened all the time. But it's gotten a lot better now. You see SEC stepping up and regulating some of these things. I think, what was his name? McAfee just got arrested for pumping and dump of ICOs back in 2017, so I thought that was rather funny. Anyway, all right, guys, if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to wrap it up. I got a 50-minute show today, and I got a whole bunch of stuff I got to do before I get out of town. So that will do it for today, unless I see something come across here the last second. Again, if you like today's show, do me a favor, give me a thumbs up or comment down below the video. On our YouTube channel, you can always go to TraderMerlin.com or email me at TraderMerlin@gmail.com. And hopefully I'll get to all those as well. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was informative for some of you who don't know anything about the crypto space, and those that are in the space, hope I did it justice. That'll do it for me, everybody. I will see you guys for a live show on Tuesday. Have a fantastic weekend.